Okay. All right, dude. Hi, Mick.
Hey, g'day, mate. How you going?
I'm good. Nice to see you.
Same here, mate. Yeah, it's all a bit volatile at the moment. I think it's captured everyone's attention.
Did you read
Business
that
in Ukraine.
Jamie Wheal thing I shared with you?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was a real sense-making mic drop.
yeah. It was. Yeah, and it was. The one thing I found really good about it was look at this, but look at that, but look at this, but look at that, and it's like this is exactly why it's confusing, but now it makes sense why it's confusing.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I better shut off that WhatsApp on my other thing. Otherwise, they'll get that noise. Yeah, and that's exactly what I was seeing this morning when I got up at 3 a.m. to go through all the news outlets and newsletters and everything with the invasion of Ukraine. It's like it's interesting because I look at the far right and then the far right and then the right and then the Republicans and then the Democrats and then the far left and the far left. All these different groups, and they all have slightly different they focus, it is what it is. We knew this was going to happen a long time ago if Russia got mad at the West, and so it's kind of inevitable. And then but everybody, so even though you can look at all the facts in the situation, they're going to see the facts in a slightly different way. So some people sound a lot like they're like really far right people who are communist. They're all for Putin doing this. He should have done it a long time ago to them. And then people like Trump, he's so hilarious. He's just saying, oh, it's wonderful what he's doing. He's such a strong guy, and it's amazing. He's taking over this big country with a lot of land and all these people, and it's like a real estate deal. All the comedians are joking about that.
Yeah.
And then the left side also has just, both sides are just off their rocker. So it's going to be, another shit show. That's going to be very noisy and confusing. And in the meantime, it's a war and people are going to die. And everybody's going to get hurt, including you and me, where we live, because of inflation. And there could be supply shocks, And then today, India came out saying that they're asking Putin to stop. And maybe China will do the same thing, I hope. I don't think it'll do any good. But then you can imagine if China took sides with Russia, maybe people would start to boycott China goods. But how would they do that? Because everything is made in China now.
Yeah, it's China might export a lot, and in theory, an export ban on China to basically give China a taste of their own medicine, if nothing else. What does that mean? Well, that means that a whole bunch of stuff can't possibly happen now, because components for things that are made might be made in Japan, might be made in Portugal. The components come from China. So once you start down that slippery slope, things get real, and the reality is that no one wants to have that happen. We still want to trade with China, and China needs us as well. I think to myself sometimes, I'm not an expert on this, but then I've read some of the expert commentary, and I realised that they're not much of an expert either.
Right.
Because it's been if the predictions of the experts were read, you would say, well, none of that came true. That just goes to show how volatile and unpredictable China and Russia can be. And when you look at it through the lens of what makes sense, or in that what's reasonable, what's what's logical. There are so many different things that could be considered logical, like you said. So many different perspectives on this, and we're dealing with Putin, who he's a master strategist, and this is years in the making, what we're seeing now, and it was happening in plain sight. And it's not that we didn't see it, it's just that we didn't want to see it. And there might not have been too much we could have done about it anyway, even if we did see it. And those who did see it didn't provide much solutions, because, I don't know, it's a very complex game, and it goes back 100 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, I mean, whether you're talking about imperialism or something like that, or you're talking about police actions like the United States does, or Pinochet in Chile and Vietnam, or you talk about shock and awe against a third world country, Iraq, and then they kind of stepped back when Russia decided they were going to go into Syria and do a whole bunch of stuff. And then, of course, Crimea happened. And since Crimea, it's been creeping towards this thing. And the thing that bugs me about everything, when I'm trying to make sense of stuff, everything, is that you have all these experts and leaders and business leaders and presidents and prime ministers and organization heads and all these people who know what they're doing, and they give speeches. They get paid $100,000 or $500,000 to give a speech about something, and they're all doing their, warning about the risks and the existential risks and the security risks and this and that and the other thing. And then they're making plans and they're doing war games, and they're getting together with their allies and doing, joint exercises. And we do all this stuff, whether it's climate change or pandemics or wars, and we know what's coming for decades. And then we have all these plans, and then we don't implement them. Nothing happens. You have COP 27, COP 292, COP 4,789. It's like every year they go to Davos, and every year they, have exercises and whatnot, and it happens, and then everybody's kind of running around like chickens with their heads cut off, wondering what the hell to do.
And that's just it, and been talking to friends about this, and it's just so hard to make sense of it and what the implications are. I think back to invasions of Iraq and wars in the Middle East, and you'd think that they're so rich in oil and all this sort of stuff that we didn't catastrophize it so much. Now that the Russia's going into Ukraine, why are we talking about petrol shocks and energy crisis and stock markets and all this sort of stuff? It's like, well, maybe there will be a spike because that's what markets do, and once it stabilizes and finds an equilibrium, even if war carries on, does it really? Do people find a way? And it's interesting how people will find a way to live with circumstances, but we could have. Why didn't we find a way to avoid it in the first place? And,
that's always the thing, isn't it? It's like, we're prepping for doomsday, and instead of prepping to have a better world, it's like, let's forget doomsday. Let's just fix things. Let's find solutions and implement them and make sure everybody benefits around the world. And then you're called a tree hugger and a utopian and all this kind of stuff. No, I just want to see things get better. That's all. It's not that big a deal, right?
I think though that with the unpredictability is that you're dealing with, in this case, Russia, which is for all intents and purposes, a totalitarian regime, he's not worried whether he's going to lose votes over anything. And so he can crash or crash through. And the people of Russia, for instance, would be the cannon fodder. They're expendable. And the same goes with places like China. They've got 1.8 billion people living in China. They're expendable. And so if China wants to do something in a long game strategy, their people are expendable for the greater good, and they just press on. Whereas more democratic countries worry about body counts, worry about effects on other people.
Yeah, we can't build a high-speed train between San Francisco and LA because of all the red tape and all the organizations and the protests and this and that and the other thing and the regulation and votes and whatnot. And they can do whatever they want. I mean, and it's also interesting to note that nobody kills Chinese people like the Chinese people, and nobody kills Russians like the Russians. You know, obviously, World War II was a horror story, and you can talk about Napoleon invading Russia and whatnot. But, you know, when Stalin wants to kill 60 million people or whatever it was, he can do it with starvation and just murder. And when Mao Zedong wanted to disrupt everything with the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, he was more than able to knock off 100 million Chinese people without even shrugging his shoulders.
Yeah.
And Putin's not going to suffer. He's got money. He's got Bitcoin. His wealth is sheltered. He probably owns more real estate in London and New York than any Brit or American.
And that's what, and as that guy that I sent you that video of, one of the guys in our pipe smoking community that lives in Russia. And he said, when you say, make sure the Russians pay, he said, oh, we will. The ordinary Russians and the ordinary Ukrainians will pay.
And you and me will pay at the gas pump and whatever. Yeah, well, and it is true that, you know, the MIC, the military industrial complex, war is big business and a lot of people are into it. I really hope, Mick, that you have a lot of defense shares. You know, I hope you bought a lot of stock in defense companies, because we're going to make out like bandits with our shares with this thing going on. But you're right. It's the ordinary people who suffer always when leaders decide to play the great game.
But like I said, it's been happening in plain sight. I'm also bemused growing up. American patriots hated the Ruskies.
Yeah.
and real patriots are Republicans, obviously.
Right.
And now it's the now it's the Republicans or the right wing of the Republican Party and your Tucker Carlsons and people like that who are praising the leader of Russia.
Yeah, they think it's a white Christian nation. That's what they think.
Yeah.
It's like this monoculture of white Christians. There are even evangelicals that have moved, that have immigrated to Russia because they think it's a more Christian nation. It's absurd. It's absurd. I mean, this Tucker thing, he's an entertainer. I think he's a cynical motherfucker, to be honest. But, you know, he's going to go with that because his audience gets a kick out of it.
But that's what sort of, you know, just people are willing to just flop their allegiances here or flop them there based on where their money's at, where, you know, obviously he's going where his audience wants him to go because that means he gets paid more money for bigger audience share. Someone like Trump, though, he whether you can prove a solid line between him and the Russian government and collusion and all that or not, the fact of the matter is that Russia has been using social media. You know, they've got the bot factories and all that. They've been using social media and other forms of communications to manipulate Western cultures in a certain direction. And Trump, you could argue, is just a piece of that puzzle. It's not. I'm not saying there's a conspiracy that Trump, was in bed with Russia. I'm saying that he was just part of that whole manipulation game, and people like Putin can play a long game because they're autocrats.
He's going to be the leader for the next 10 years.
Right? He doesn't have to worry about election cycles or anything like that. He just poisons people if they get in his way. So he can manipulate thought, one of the things that amazed me was that there's actually a television station called In Russia Today in America.
Sure. I watched some RT. Chris Hedges has a show on RT. He's a very legit intellectual and journalist and writer, author. And he's on a progressive kind of left, I think. And he got booted from the Times because he was talking about Iraq, like people did back then. And, they have some good shows on RT. I mean, big deal, right? I mean, Voice of America, people constantly talk about that being a CIA cutout. Everything's a CIA cutout, right?
Yeah.
To certain people. And, the gray zone and whatnot. I appreciate some of the work they do, but they're also, everything to them is like an American CIA operation. It's black ops. It's like Delta Force all the time,
Mm.
And come on, yes, the US causes a lot of shit, around the world. And we did start with the surveillance capitalism, and we did start the, NSA and spying on our own people and all that stuff. But we always point our finger at China because of that video surveillance.
Yeah.
And we invented all that stuff. Uncle Sam is the guy. He's the Goomba's Goomba. He's the boss's boss. He's the Tony Soprano's Tony Soprano, Good old Uncle Sam. Yeah. So what are you going to do? Yeah.
Well, it's just it would be so good to have a black hat and a white hat and know who was wearing what. But this is more of a mess we've got ourselves into, and this current situation is just a symptom of the mess we've got ourselves into.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing I'm always thinking about is like, it's baked into the system. It's baked into the structure of the structures of the system, into the institutions, into everything, So it's going a certain way. And then we get mad at each other and we're wondering why things are goofy and we can't seem to fix them. And well, it's kind of baked in, this whole thing. So yeah, when you talk about sense making in game A, game B, and all that kind of stuff, the game theoretics of it, the heavy competitiveness of it, competition and winning, winners and losers, and zero-sum games and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, that's what it is, So yeah, Russia's doing it, America's doing it, China's doing it, UK's doing it, France is doing it, Japan's doing it, they're all doing it. And this whole, world order of liberal democracy, this kind of neoliberal global economic system, it's a US invention, really. And it's a US experiment. And what I'm worried about is that if this thing spirals out of control, this experiment could fail. I mean, you might wind up tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but a couple of years from now, with an autocrat in the States, with an autocrat in Britain.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be, it could be like Vietnam, the domino theory. Suddenly it's like boom, 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 boom. we need a strong man in the United States. We're weak now. Biden's weak. We need somebody strong to put things back together again. There's got to be coherence, cohesiveness. We need a perfect, Neo-Platonist state that reeks of the essence of, purity and whatnot. You know what I mean? It's like this is where we're headed, maybe, but it could fail. It's a lot harder to evolve a democracy and to figure out how to run one well. We can't even, have a U.S. Constitution 2.0. And there's so much religiosity to it too, It's like,
and that's it. I think we were discussing that in the last video to a certain extent. Was the stacks on from the system that was created, and it becomes something that you can't recognise from what the creators of the system envisaged and they were very careful to try and put checks and balances in, but money talks and bullshit walks, and over time things get piled on, and and next thing you know, you're in a system that is very hard to change because there's too much at stake for individuals.
And this bullshit is lucrative. Right? Like I joked with you on WhatsApp, I said, it's hard to make money making sense. You nuanced, deep, considerate thinking based on facts and science and data and blah, blah, blah. Are you shitting me? How fucking boring is that? Give me the shit show. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, there's no clickbait in sense making, but at the moment, this is what a lot of people are crying out for. They're looking for in relation to this, and like I said, it's a bit of a phenomenon to me if I thought about it logically, but I suppose emotionally it's not a phenomenon. But everyone's keenly observing this. In a way that they weren't necessarily keenly observing other conflicts or other invasions or what have you. Or they're certainly looking at it from a And so when the West went into Iraq, and it doesn't really matter for the purpose of this point what the motivations were or what the intentions were, but we're like, and now it's like Russia's coming into one of our allies, and it's all of a sudden we're seeing it from different eyes,
right?
And that's I've noticed that more people they've gone, okay, I'm happy to go along with my bubble, but all of a sudden now I want to get out of my bubble. I'm looking for independent information. I'm looking for new sources. People are starting to say, where can I get a perspective on this? Because they know that their usual bubble will only give them one perspective, and they're starting to mistrust that, or they're starting to recognise that it is a bubble. So if you only get your news from, for instance, certain cable television networks, it's like, well, if you're a CNN person, you're not going to go to Fox News. That's not a viable alternative. But you're thinking, okay, CNN telling me everything. What else is out there? Who else can I trust? And I've been using the Globe Hackers Multimedia Facebook page to go through the list and get some perspectives on things, because in a way you've done some of the heavy lifting. But it is a genuine. I think people are starting to realise, hang on, we need to actually know the truth here. We want to understand it. Whereas before we're happy not to necessarily understand the full story.
Yeah, I mean, and Putin now, he's he's just ripping pages out of the US Uncle Sam's playbook right and left. So he talked about genocide. He talked about WMD, right? So that's why we invaded Iraq, because of WMD. Later, that was proven to be a bullshit. But anyway, so he's just, saying, okay, I'm gonna outdo the Amerikanskis. Every little turn, he's way ahead, and he's not an evil genius, he's not a supervillain. He's not the cause of everything. And that's the funny thing too. It's like we want to believe, or some people do, that Putin is this ingenious supervillain, and that he's the cause of all the problems, the evil Russia. It's so stupid. It's so shallow. I've been to Vladivostok, Moscow. I've been to Odessa and Kiev, or Kiev, however you want to say it, and Yalta, and so on. The people are lovely. I mean, what can I say? I just don't have a problem with Russian people or Ukrainian people. I mean, it's just so damn tragic. And, it's sad for Russia, because if you go against Putin and his cronies, he'll just kill you. I mean, it happens all the time, even on foreign soil. And it is a fact. You just can't go against him. So it would be a tragedy if the US is so dumb and weak that it allows its experiment to be undermined and end because of all this nonsense. So you're absolutely right. People really have to start. We used to talk about critical thinking all the time. So what are critical thinking skills? You're looking at heuristics, and you're looking at logical fallacies, and you're looking, at the Kahneman kind of thinking fast and slow thing. And you're looking at Bayesian probabilities and statistics and data and math. Even if you can't do the math, you can learn to make sense of the world in a better way. I mean, you can. It's available to everybody. And it's time we do it, because we're facing really complicated challenges now. I mean, this war is going to be a complicated mess to get ourselves out of. And it's really sad, because the pandemic was a simple thing to deal with, and we knew what to do. But everybody decided that, they were going to, I did it my way. At last, I've got Corona. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Exhausting, exasperating.
I think if you looked at a helicopter view of this, it's not unique, but it's shining probably a brighter light on how the divisive or the division that a lot of Western cultures have within their own borders, within their own countries, it's been ripe for exploitation now by someone like Vladimir Putin, who can basically point the finger and say, well, you guys set the precedent and it was okay when you did it. It's almost like he's just been sitting back and letting the Western countries go first in their sins, and then, but he just does it on steroids, I suppose. But it's like I said, I think we've been played and it's been a long game. What do they say about you never butt in when your opponent is defeating themselves, basically, or about to fall over. I think that it's more a matter of manipulating situations, creating bigger divisions. One of the things I think that a country like America and Australia and Britain, one thing they can do is start closing the gaps in their own countries if they want to be stronger, they don't need to go and prove their manhood with guns and bombs overseas. They need to actually look inward and say, we need to really start getting our own shit in a pile, because this is what's caused these issues. It's the political game playing based on financial gain. And obviously we've seen in recent years personal financial gain from certain leaders. And, you know, we used to not laugh at, but we used to look disparagingly at despot leaders in faraway lands. Well, you know, I'll put my hand up in my opinion, but Trump was a despot leader in that everything he did in his presidency was about firming up his own financial position.
Well, he's a kleptocrat. He's a kleptocrat and a business failure, and he even failed at being a kleptocrat. He lost money, you know. He's such a fool. He's such a goofball. I mean, yeah, he's a weirdo genius in a certain way, but he's also just a moron. If you want to talk about genius kleptocrats, you know, you could look at some of the people in Africa who've been around, you know, in leadership for 40 years or whatever, just robbing the hell out of the country. But then we extract wealth from the globe in order to make money. And the global corporations need all these materials to make their stuff and sell their stuff. The idea that China doesn't want to sell stuff to the United States, that it wants to have a problem with the US, that's ridiculous. And unfortunately for Putin, he's going to pay more than he thinks for this venture. It's going to cost him a lot. And I wouldn't be surprised if it cost him his job eventually, but who knows? But it's going to be more expensive. You know, price discovery and all of this bullshit is really hard. And it's false. It's not real. It doesn't take into account the true cost of things. So yeah, the energy and all that, what a waste, you know, all the energy put into this. And what we really need to do right now globally is get real with ourselves and say, we have to redefine growth. We have to redefine what it means to be wealthy. We have to redefine, you know, what it means to be healthy, you know, public health. We have to take a long, hard look at our business culture, because everything's violence in this culture that we have now. And it's a global culture. And whether you're chopping down the Amazon rainforest or wrecking the oceans, you know, these big gill nets, these huge nets, these gigantic fishing trawlers that just rip through things, the oil spills, the carbon in the atmosphere, all of it, you know, it's just the civilization, AKA the heat engine, is a violent, nasty, dirty, stinky thing. And it's also amazing, you know, we have all kinds of nice stuff, but we have to think about that. And it's hard for people to do that. We're so spoiled, you know. I want to buy my truck. I want to have a big house. I want to use energy. So yeah, the wealthy people with their 3 planes and their 12 gigantic houses, you know, like we talked about last time, they use more energy than your average, you know, nation in some other place. But the current game rewards bad behavior. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's designed, it's built for purpose. You know, this isn't an accident. If you want to go back to the Victorian age and the days of the robber barons in the late 19th century, for example, or you could even go back to the French Revolution or whatever you want to do. But you see people, you know, designing the game and the system for their own benefit so that they have a chance of winning and winning big. You know, there's no point. You go big or go home. There's no point in winning if it's not, you know, the lottery has to be worth $1 trillion now, or it's not even fun to play. You know, in the old days, you win $100,000, you know, kind of thing.
I
And now it's
remember.
like,
Well, we had a Powerball game last night, and it paid out $126 million, $63 million each to two winners, and your immediate thought, and it doesn't matter whether it was 6 million or 126 million or whatever, your immediate thought is, oh, imagine winning and having to share it with someone else. It's like, yeah, $63 million just doesn't go as far as it used to. But and I suppose that gets to a point too, when someone's on the up and up in their ambition and they're making money, and next thing you know, they've got all the money they could possibly want. There's only one thing left, and that's ego. And that is like, so someone like Putin, for instance, is, extremely wealthy, financially, personally wealthy, doesn't need to be president of Russia, doesn't need to be in his current position, but he chooses to because he's got all the money he wants. There's only one thing left now, and that's the scariest bit. When someone's motivated by money, you sort of can predict that sort of thing. But when someone's gone beyond that level, and I'm saying Putin, but I'm meaning a whole bunch of other people, as well.
Absolutely.
What is left? When I look at the British aristocracy and they're all getting into Parliament to be Prime Minister, well, you don't need to be. You earn 10 times that per year just in interest in your investments. Why would you want the salary of a Prime Minister? It's got to be for shits and giggles and the feeling of power. It's an ego thing. It's a status thing. There are billions.
Is a problem in all of this too, and the revolving door between private public sector that everybody always talks about, and the inequality problem. I mean, if you're making $200,000-$300,000 in the United States, you don't care about anything because you have more than enough to shelter yourself. And I made a joke on Facebook that bubbles are a lot more comfortable than bunkers. So stay in your bubble as long as you can, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And these guys, you're right. They're in it for the power and the money and the prestige and the attention and the validation and the ego. It's all a kind of pathology. And
but once we get to ego, but once we get to the ego stage and the power stage, that's where it's unpredictable. And that's where people feel that, well, they've gone beyond. They don't have anything to lose personally by their actions. And that's the scariest bit, because they're going to be okay one way or the other. Right from that despot African leader who manages to squirrel away into asylum into a friendly country so they don't get hung, drawn and quartered by the revolutionaries. They get off scot-free, and we have a history across the world of bad people getting away with it, and one way or the other. And sometimes it's just pure appeasement. It's like, all right, enough. All right, we'll grant you safe passage. Just get the fuck out. Well, no, where's the justice? I think we've been desensitized to the lack of real justice. That
it's bizarre too. Gaddafi's in, then he's out. Noriega's in, and then he's out. We make deals with drug kingpins all the time. It's not just in Ozark, it's a real deal. And then you're selling weapons to the drug dealers. That was a big scandal. And then you're making deals with the Contras, Reagan and the Contra thing. And these bad guys who are in the system, who are, part and parcel of it, the creators, the rule makers, the lawmakers, they always skate. They get away with everything. And too big to fail, right? I mean, we had that 2008 horror story, and we're waiting for another one now. We're just lining up for it. After the war, then we're going to go into another financial crisis. which brings me to this whole thing about trying to figure out the DAO decentralized, what is it? Decentralized open, what is it, DAO? Decentralized autonomous organization. And Web3 and blockchains and smart contracts and cryptocurrencies. And, you know, people, the young people are saying, to heck with this, we're smart, we know what we're doing, we can create something, we can find solutions, we can build things. And fuck these old people in their stupid old game. You know, that piece that Jordon Hall wrote recently, which was kind of a poetic homage ode to Web3, you know, somehow it's an opportunity for human beings to become conscious again and create something that's good, right? Yeah, well, there's a lot of pitfalls, there's a lot of dangers there, and it can work both ways, because I'm sure Putin has, you know, people on the DAO and people on the Web3, and he's got his own internet, his own World Wide Web, and he's got probably tons of Bitcoin, you know, in his portfolio, and Ethereum and Cardano or whatever it is, Serrano.
Yeah, and that's just it. You know, banning him from the exchange. He would. That's a textbook play. He would have accounted for all of that, and there's the blockchain. There's cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
You know, which was actually the preferred currency of underworld figures. Well, we're dealing with an underworld figure here, and so he's hit to all of that. I mean, I think it's going to cost. I don't know if it will cost him as dearly as it should, but it will definitely cost dearly all those that had no say in it and are just passengers on this trip at the moment. And I feel deeply sorry for those directly affected. I know we're all going to be affected in some way, but if you're a Russian citizen or a Ukrainian citizen or anyone that's you know, directly attached in some way, this is just your worst dream. You know, it's you didn't ask for. No one asked for this.
Yeah,
or not very many people did either. Anyway, so
I'm trying to look up this book, this social critic. I can't find it, but it's something about how America invented the underworld. Yeah, you can go back to Rome, and you know, you have your clients and your slaves, and they can buy their freedom or, you know, whatever. You have the Roman model, you have all these ancient models of doing things, and medieval models of doing things, and then you get into the modern era. And, you know, we get into these constitutional democracies and nation states. All of this is pretty new stuff. And then that's a really interesting book of cultural and social criticism, because it kind of shows you how in the 19th century, you know, and even before that, in the United States, there was this fantastic opportunity to create so much wealth and to get so much. You know, the whole world went there to North America to try to, you know, to get rich, to get powerful. You know, the railroad people, and, you know, how the West was won, and the Indian Wars, and the Louisiana Purchase, and on, all the history, right? But when you're talking about an underworld figure, which Putin definitely is, but he's right out there. He's telling you his thoughts and feelings, and he's just showing his cards all the time. And we all sit around like, oh yeah, that's bad, but we love it, you know, because we worship con artists, and we worship, you know, the tough guy and the gangsters, you know. I keep always joking about Peaky Blinders, right? You know, it's like, who's your Peaky Blinder? You know, kind of thing. And, you know, we just love that Cockney badass type of deal. Like you're saying.
But the problem is, though, that people forget that throughout the story of whether it be The Godfather or Sopranos or Peaky Blinders or whatever, yes, the hero or the anti-hero or whoever wins out in the end, but everyone else around them dies.
Right.
So
a lot of them die nowadays in these shows, you know.
Yeah. But it's like, why do you... Yeah. It's like there's no good ending to this shit. It's like the old saying is, if you lie down with dogs, you wake up with fleas. Well, it's worse than that. You get in bed with these people, you might not be able to get out of bed at all. You either go out in jail or a coffin. It's, you know, and it's a mug's game. But some people I think we've got into a situation geopolitically where there is, like I said, there is no black hat, there is no white hat. It's just a very grey situation of mixed morals and ethics, flexible morals and ethics, and hypocrisy. And someone like Putin, he's just very good at manipulating all of that and just using all of that against, like using their own selves against them.
Yeah, I'm sure Putin's read Sun Tzu Art of War about 30,000 times. He probably memorized it. He's like a Muslim that memorizes the Quran, you know. Putin's probably in there like memorizing Sun Tzu's Art of War, Miyamoto Musashi, The Book of Five Rings, you know. He's like, yeah, okay, I got it, you know.
But I think we've got to understand too that if you want to, if you think that Putin won't do something because that doesn't make sense or that might create too many enemies, he gave us a taste of just how ruthless he can be when it came in Syria. He just flew in and bombed the crap out of it and didn't worry about collateral damage, while the West was worrying about the optics of killing women and children. Putin just went in there and said, if you want the job done, you've got to kill them all, and just poof. And he showed us how ruthless he is willing to be.
Well, the US always pretends like, you know, the drone strikes are surgical and they're vetted and we have boots on the ground and spies and good intelligence information and packages for the president and whatnot. But we kill a lot of innocent people also.
Do you think that
it's messy,
might be,
it's messy.
Without getting into a full-on psychoanalysis of the world and Trump and all that sort of stuff, but when you look at the attributes of a Putin or a Trump, and I'm not saying Trump's anywhere near as intelligent or whatever as Putin, but or Xi Jinping or someone like that, do you think that maybe we give them reverence because they are blatantly honest about what their intentions are and how they're going to go about it? Whereas in the West, we're a little bit more cynical because we, in our heart of hearts, we know that we do those bad things too, but we just don't admit it as blatantly as what others would. You know, again, because the West has democracies and there's votes to worry about. Whereas in a tyranny, you don't need, or an autocracy, you don't need to worry about the votes. And so you can actually just be quite frank about everything.
Yeah, it's like the American Psycho, you know, you have the Dark Triad all over the place. You know, it's just like there's this pyramid power Dark Triad hanging out of the earth. You can call it Satan. But yeah, the people are pretty, I mean, it's kind of required for certain job descriptions to be Dark Triad, you know, in a way.
Yeah.
If you're gonna play for all the marbles and do your Genghis Khan thing and make your enemies run and take their women and whatever. You have to have a certain kind of personality type, a certain kind of psychology to do that.
Yeah.
You know, some of us just don't want to get rich enough. You know, it's not the most important thing to us to have, you know, like, yeah, if I had $1.365 billion, I think I'd be okay, you know.
Yeah.
And other people are like, no, it's got to be more, you know, I got to have more.
Well, look at, yeah, if you look at anyone in business, people who are CEOs are the ones, generally speaking, high-level general managers and presidents of companies and CEOs, and they're people who were willing to do what was needed to be done, and not necessarily bad things, but they were prepared to make sacrifices, or they were prepared to be more flexible in their ethics and morals in certain situations where they, you know, whereas other people may stand on a principle and say, right, well, this is where I draw the line, and I refuse to do that. Therefore, that's the end of my career, or that's the glass ceiling I've just bumped into. Whereas more successful financial people are those who are prepared to do the things that others aren't prepared to do. And if you take that to a next level, some people are prepared to do the bad things that other people aren't prepared to do. And successful armies are the ones that are prepared to do the things that maybe more civilized armies just draw the line at. And that's what makes them successful. Maybe not ultimately, but in the medium term, certainly. And you know, a successful CEO might be a good person, but it was prepared to work harder, or prepared to make more personal sacrifices, or was prepared to travel, or was prepared to work back, you know. And some of us go, no, I have a view that my family comes first, or my safety comes first. And so we all set standards, or we set parameters around someone like a tyrant is just completely beyond that altogether. It's not just doing what was necessary, but was almost willing and passionate about doing those things as well.
Yeah, and they'll break the rules and make new rules. Like you said, that they do what they got to do, you know. And they'll push that to the limit, sure, because they're that kind of person. And there are a lot of people like that, you know. And sometimes, like people have said that we follow, you know, you need some people like that. I think it was Jim Rutt who was saying, you know, if I'm going to go to war, I don't want my general to be a nice guy. I want, you know, General Patton out there, you know, beating up injured soldiers.
Ultimately, you need checks and balances on that, but yes, you do need some extremes to be in your camp. The ones that can actually see beyond the line, and you know, but that is the frustration when you get down to it. You know, police officers are frustrated that they're limited by the law, whereas the criminal that they're chasing isn't limited by the law. Soldiers in uniform going into peacekeeping exercises are limited in what they can do, but the people that they are trying to bring to justice are not limited to the, you know, so that the same standards, and they can do some savage things. And indeed terrorism. Terrorists use countries' limits and stuff against them, doing what other people aren't prepared to do. You're not prepared to do what it takes to stop me, but I'm prepared to do what it takes to get what I want. So there's that conflict, and that's where, like I said, sometimes morals and ethics are flexible, or they're not black and white, they're not binary, they're situational. And sociopaths and psychopaths are just not limited by that thinking.
and it's provisional and it evolves and it changes. Our
Mm.
circle of what we consider ethics or compassion or whatever may be bigger or smaller depending on a lot of things. The Karl Popper, the myth of the framework. I mean, I just want to tell everyone who listens to this, you have to listen to that audio book. It's important. It's really, really good. It's like got all of Karl Popper in there. But I like the style of thinking where people, whoever it is, understand that, it's not binary. It could go all kinds of ways, Things could be done all kinds of ways, And they're arguing from history or arguing from empiricism, evidence, or whatever, or arguing from ontology or epistemology or whatever you're doing, whatever perspective you're taking. You can come up with arguments that are rational and reasonable for things, but that doesn't mean that's your only choice, your only potential outcome. Other things can happen, other things can be done, other things have been done. When Pete, I forgot the name of that book as well, but it's a book about how things have been in other cultures in the past, and not all cultures are hierarchical and competitive. It's like a bonobo and chimp type of thing. But even bonobos and chimps are complex creatures, and they're not all the same. Some are sexier than others, some are meaner than others, So that's an interesting thing, and you can debate about that and say, well, it's human nature. It's always been like this or something. But then people can find evidence that there are other ways to do things. And then you talk about the Dunbar number, and maybe we can have decent communities if they're not too big. How do we scale them? And here in Portugal, you can see how it used to be in old Europe. Because if I walk from village to village, there's a shop, a school, and a church in every single village, right? So it's kind of, each little village is a what do you call it? Another version of the other village,
Yeah.
They're self-contained, but they're also part of a bigger thing, Like I'm in Leiria, that's the state or whatever, province or whatever we call it. And Leiria has tons of villages and a few big cities, but it's totally doable that you could have a world where you didn't have to go so fast, you didn't have to go so far, you didn't have to have so much. Like, I hate the idea that there's cars everywhere. I'd much rather have people on electric bicycles and stuff. And then you can rent a car. You can have access to a vehicle when you need one, And you have logistics vehicles. You have security and police vehicles and emergency vehicles, but you don't necessarily have to have so many cars in the city. You could have skate parks and animals and flower gardens and people could slow down and there'd be less stress and you could smell the roses and hang out with your friends and, you didn't isn't it cool when you live in a city where you can just open the door and kind of put the city on like it's a nice suit of clothes, and you say, I don't need a big house because I've got Golden Gate Park, I've got the waterfront, I've got Ocean Beach, I've got the downtown, it's all there and it's accessible. I can get to it with public transportation, I can walk, it's pedestrian friendly. I'm talking about San Francisco, but I lived in Tokyo, and great public transportation. You can go to all these different cities within Tokyo and enjoy the unique character of that location. And it's accessible and it's there and you can walk out and get what you need. The convenience store is there, the grocery store is there, all the stuff you need is in your little town in Tokyo. And then it's, but we don't need all the cars. We can do something different. We could develop a game B thing, but my worry is that we just don't have time, because if we're going to have a whole bunch of people experimenting with different ways of managing business, different ways of accomplishing things, of creating things, of establishing community, and on. And this is all experimental, and we're trying to see what works and what doesn't work. And maybe some weird people, some, in the world, rich, democratic, industrial, educated people can think of these things. Is it going to catch on in Nigeria? Is it going to catch on in Arab states? Is it going to catch on in Russia? Is it going to catch on in Bosnia, in Indonesia, Muslim countries, or in Japan? Does Japan want to do game B? Japan's kind of stagnant. It hasn't changed much since I was there. It's got this weird thing going on, and it just kind of stuck. So I wonder, even if there was like 1,000 game B communities around the world, would it catch on? Maybe, I don't know. It could, but I just feel like how many generations do we need to have this?
Yeah, it's an evolutionary thing, but unfortunately, we do. Then I suppose this goes down in a rabbit hole for another time, but we don't learn lessons from even our immediate past, let alone over time. You talk about traveling less unnecessarily, and then having more freedom to go further beyond when you can. Look at the pandemic. There's this big push here in Australia now to get people back to the office. And the reason we want to get people back to the office, well, to get people back to the office, you need to remove the masks and you need to remove the controls. But the reason we need to get people back to the office is not because necessarily we want people back mingling with each other in a closed environment. It's because all those businesses that rely on lots of people in the office have been struggling. And that's, we need to get their livelihoods dependent on everyone getting back into the office. There's trains just going past, you can probably hear. But so it's that catch-22 that if we keep everyone apart for safety reasons, also like pure safety and things, and we stop people travelling into the cities, then there are going to be some losers in that. What we're not so much talking about, though, is that over the last 2 years where I live, so many people have been working from home that they've been shopping more at their local shopping strips, and their local cafes and takeaway joints have been able to do okay out of this because local people are shopping local. And there is a lesson here in that maybe we got too big, we got too centralised, and too many people were going into the CBD of Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane just to sit there and do work they could easily have done sitting at home without all that extra travel.
Yeah, much has been written about the suburbs, for example, right?
And I'm just wondering, I don't know if we're going to learn some lessons and take some positives out of this. I think that there's individual companies that have gone, we can save all this money on office space by not having an office in the CBD. We've all been, we may have to only rent 20% of the size that we once had, and we can bring people together once a week in groups and things like that. We can be a little bit more flexible. But we created such a big system reliant on masses of amounts of people going into a central point that to dismantle that needs to take time. And there's and you want to you want to soften the impact on those most affected, to wit, the businesses that relied on all these people. But it's where there's a will, there's a way, and are we prepared to start along that journey? We looked at that with coal. In 1976, scientists were telling us we're very worried about Australia's reliance on coal, and we're very worried about the world's reliance on coal and fossil fuels. We have time. We have probably 50 years to do something about this slowly. But no. We put our heads in the sand for 40 of those years.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, just dramatic thing. And so we refuse to do it because it's too dramatic. It's like we're constantly not learning the lessons.
I put up, I shared some article about, solar panels are made out of coal. They need a lot of heat to make them. And most of that heat comes from burning coal. So the green economy isn't really going to be green for a long time. It's going to take time.
No, it does take time.
Before you have electricity making green equipment, and the electricity isn't, created from fossil fuels. It's going to take time. And these social experiments are going to take time. I'm all for incremental change, looking forward like I used to when I was a youngin', and thinking there was generations and generations to come that would, be sorting things out. And I could find solace and joy in just a little bit of progress here and there, and all that kind of thing. But like you say, I mean, sometimes it just feels like we're not learning from our mistakes. We're not implementing the plans that we're making, going back to the beginning of the conversation. And I'm wondering now, with the existential threats that Daniel Schmachtenberger often lists when he talks, do we have time, with the multipolar traps and so on, and the game theoretic nonsense? Do we have time to lose, to waste? No, I don't think we do have any more time to waste. And this Ukraine-Russia thing is just another example of what happens when we waste time. And it's all a waste of energy, a waste of time, a waste of life, and it's tragic. So maybe we should end it here, huh? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think so, but we'll no doubt be picking up again soon as things evolve.
Yep. So once a week we should talk at least, but man, thanks a lot, buddy.
Thanks, mate.
Let's hope and pray and do whatever we have to do that things don't get too much worse than they are over there in Ukraine and Russia and the region. Damn.
Yeah, and let's hope that we have some people observing the lessons that need to be learned as we tick along this. We need to be learning from it, and hopefully a few people who can think outside the box may get involved and broker some sort of start of peace, or at least some equilibrium anyway.
Yeah, we need it.
Anyway, mate.
Thanks a lot, man. Enjoy your pipe. Have a nice rest, a peaceful sleep.
The weekend's just starting, so hopefully this weekend will be good.
Good on you,
Thanks, mate.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. See ya.